And now, weighing in out of the blue corner, Josh the Punk Thompson. 100% and on the other mic, he weighs in from the red corner, Big John McCarthy.
John, we had a special guest on today. I was excited, for this to happen. You made this all come about, and Randy Couture talked to us. How do you think it went?
Yeah, Randy is so logical about everything, and that's the way he was as a fighter. He's a logical person. He doesn't get emotionally too high or emotionally too low, and he's been part of so many big things throughout his career. But this is a guy that took a lot of chances. He gambled as far as I'm gambling on myself in this situation, and did things at times when nobody else would do them. So it's just good to always have him, able to give you a little bit of insight, the way he looks at the world, what's going on with the COVID virus, all this whole thing. He's one of those guys that will always be special to the sport of MMA. He's on my Mount Rushmore, even though he's not on Chael's. Okay. Chael blew it on that one.
I wanted to ask him about it. I mean, and he gave a lot of those guys credit. I mean, it must be nice, because I asked him a couple of times about how, to see the success that a lot of these guys have had that came from Team Quest, because you had Dan, you had, Evan Tanner, and you had Matt Lindland and himself, and then you had Nate Quarry and Chael and, Robert Follis. And there was a lot of good guys that came out of that gym up there in Oregon, and where they're at, what they're doing now, and what the success they're having, or who they've helped groom along the way that are the next generation into the sport is pretty remarkable. It
is. And, and one of the things, I think it was our very first podcast, you brought up the Mount Rushmore, and one of your picks was BJ Penn, and a lot of people, you can't, look at his record, and you can look at Randy's record. And this is the whole thing when you're looking at these special people that were part of the sport and have helped direct the sport into, where it's at now. Randy didn't have the greatest record, but he was absolutely a trendsetter in so many directions. He was the first guy, heavyweight champion, then went to lightweight champion, then went back and won the heavyweight championship again. And he did so many things, and he helped so many other people, other fighters, come along and get to a level that they would not have gotten to if they didn't have him as part of their background. And some of the ones are the ones you're talking about. He's a special person. It was just great to have him on.
Yeah, it's always great to sit and talk with him. The last time we had seen him was in LA for the Cyborg fight. He just so happened to be in town, and we all got together and had dinner and food and stuff, and just pleasant to be around. You know what I mean? There's never he's nothing like me. So he's just even keel across the board, very, very soft spoken, but speaks from the heart. But and he sees both sides. So when you're having a conversation with him, it's not like, oh, my way is this way. It's nice to engage in a conversation where it's not like, I got you, especially in this day and age. And it's a very pleasant conversation, and it was great having him on, and if you guys are listening to this, hope you guys enjoyed it. Randy, the Natural Couture, is coming up. All right, guys, here with Josh Thompson, Big John McCarthy, and we have a special guest today, Randy Couture. Thank you so much for coming on. I mean, during this time, there's not a whole lot to talk about, so we wanted to pick your brain about all the stuff that's been going on with you and what you think and your thoughts on the sport. So Randy, Big John was actually like, hey, maybe we should call up Randy and see what's going on. So here you are, buddy. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
We got these problems. You got to bring in Captain America, because it's got to be solved. Holy shit. How's everything been going, brother?
Been good, man. 3 weeks on lockdown. Gym's been closed. Kind of going through the pains of this whole thing with everybody else. It's been a bit strange, honestly.
So you're going stir crazy like the rest of us.
Exactly. The cabin fever has set in.
Have you talked with your, because you own a huge facility. It's really big. Have you talked to your landlords or anything about working out rent, any of that stuff?
We reached out to them real early. We actually were closed the gym 2 days before it got mandated by the state here and the governor. We were just trying to be ahead of it. I anticipated what was going on, and we're applying for the PPP for our employees and our independent contractors, which most of our instructors are. We're in the queue with the bank because everybody's applying at the same time.
Yep.
And we've already gone ahead and paid the month of April to our employees. We took a 6-month average of their income and paid them that average for the month of April. I mean, they're all operating on margins and can't afford to have no pay come in for a whole month. I mean, it's crazy. So, but I mean, there's the entire country. In fact, there's a whole bunch of places in the entire world that are in the same situation.
Yeah.
So,
like California, like LA just extended it till May 15th. The Bay Area is actually, they haven't said anything about lifting it yet, but they've only done it until May 3rd. I think that the nationwide one is what, May 1st, which is what,
May 1st. And I think I heard rumors that Nevada was trying to stay in line with the May 1st, but who knows? It's changing almost daily. It's changing. So, I mean, the numbers are changing. Are we over the curve? Have we lowered the curve? What's really going on? Yeah. Trying to find any real information has been a real problem.
Yeah, sorry, John, I'm going to ask all these questions.
That's all right. Just keep on going, dude. I'm just going to sit here and listen. Yeah. That's all right. I just thought you and your questions.
I'm just running away with it, man.
Now I feel like Podcast Dave.
Well, Podcast Dave doesn't pay attention. I do pay attention. No, I just, May 1st, I think, is what they're trying to go by here. The numbers, if you look at the media sources, but the problem is you can't because they're so up and down. It depends. One day they hate everybody. One day it's, we're all going to die. And the next day, it's looking great. So it depends on, where the revenue stream, I think, is coming in for them in that day.
There's a lot of truth in that statement, especially at the end of that statement.
Yes. So, I mean, when they first came out, they had estimated 250,000 deaths probably by the time this thing was all done in the United States. Then they said 100,000 deaths, and then that didn't go anywhere. Now we're what are we at now? Like 20,000, I think, in nationwide, 20,000 deaths.
A little over 20.
About a week ago, they said 60,000 deaths. We're estimated about 60,000 deaths. Now we're only at 20. I mean, I know it seems like we're at the curve and kind of on we're plateaued right now, it seems like, and then we're potentially going down. Do you start looking at what your state is doing versus what California is doing, or do you look at it nationwide?
Well, I think you have to be careful. Obviously, there's some hot spots. New York is a hot spot. New Jersey's a hot spot. Early on, Washington State and California were hot spots. And they kind of set the bar for the rest of the country. There are other places that are very minimal exposure. So you got to kind of start to analyze that and look at the big picture. Obviously those population centers are going to be hit harder. There's no way they're not going to be.
Yeah.
More contacts, more exposure. So more people traveling in and out on a regular basis. So, I mean, that stands to reason. You think it's going to get as bad in Montana as it's going to get in New York? There's just no way. It's just not going to happen. So, I think you have to kind of take all of that with a grain of salt. Look at the big picture. I don't know. It's certainly historical. There's no doubt about that.
People in Montana and Wyoming have been social distancing since they were born there, and so their nearest neighbor is probably a good mile, maybe 2 miles away at least. So it's pretty funny.
There's a bunch of Sasquatches out there running around just laughing.
Yeah.
Like, we've been doing this forever.
Normally, Randy, you are basically, you're running around with your hair on fire. That's why you're bald. Okay.
Exactly.
Because it's burned all off. I mean, you're always doing something, going somewhere. And then I know the PFL had their season that they postponed right now. Do you have an idea? Have they even given you an idea of when they're looking to start back up, or not even yet?
I mean, obviously everything's in flux and in flow. They're playing it by ear, but right now they're hoping to be back up and running with probably a shortened season by July. But all of these dates and things that we're talking about all affect that when this thing's open back up. I saw where Texas is talking about getting businesses back open and back up and running in that state, and so they've got drive-through testing and a bunch of other things going on there. So they feel like they want to get their state back up and running. That's the first I've heard of somebody kind of bucking the system and looking to try and open their businesses and everything back up. It's going to be interesting to see what other states follow suit. I think there's certainly some of the other states that have not been hit as hard that aren't going to be as exposed or are problematic and can probably get things up and running and opened up sooner. And the longer this drags out, the worse it's going to be. The longer this footprint for what's going on is going to carry on.
When do we just cut our? Well, I mean, I know it sounds really bad to
You're
say.
Gonna say cut our losses.
Yeah,
really? That's what you're going to go
I was
with?
just. I mean, it's going to sound really bad. I had to rethink it as soon as the word "cut" came out of my mouth. I mean, realistically, like. When do you think when's too long is too long? Because I mean, once you get past, I think, another month, the economy will take another a year and a half, 2 years for it to even start to look for a rebound. If we were to hit another month or two after this, if it went into June and July, we're looking at a lot. I mean, I don't even know if we wouldn't be a recession; it'd be a depression at that point. You know, so
yeah.
how long?
That's what
how long is too long?
I think that's what everybody's scared of, and I think that people are kind of waking up, looking at the big picture, looking at what really is going on. Mm-hmm. I think thankfully we have such an amazing medical infrastructure in this country, and still, you know, by the projections, going to be slammed. And in some cities, it certainly is. But I think our curve, because we reacted quickly, and our infrastructure is so well in place, we've handled this pretty well by what I can see and what I've read. Now, I think that's going to depend on who you ask. There are some that are going to point fingers and say that, no, we didn't react quickly enough. But by the guidelines that WHO was putting out, and I think there's some culpability with the WHO here with WHO and what they were putting out and what their motives were early on. We responded fairly quickly, and I think that's showing in the numbers and why it's not as bad as they originally projected.
Yeah, Major League Baseball had said that they were looking at having all their baseball games in Arizona because they have relatively no cases in Arizona. You know, it's very light there, and they said if they do open up, they'll try to probably do just no fans for the first month or two. If that happens, like once we do open back up, what do you see with your gym happening as well? Because I have 2 gyms here, and so I start thinking to myself, when I open up, do you only allow, say, 20 people at a time in the gym for the first month? You know, I mean, then how do you have memberships and It's a really.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to gauge any of that without any real information. You know, most of the testing has just come online in the last week, maybe week and a half if we're lucky. So we're starting to get a bigger picture of real numbers. How many are infected? Obviously, the critical cases are well known because those are the folks that are looking at ICU and potentially need to progress to a ventilator and all this other stuff. But it's I don't know. It's tough to say, and we're kind of all going on the fly and making the best decisions we can with the information at hand.
Well, both of you guys have owned gyms. I own gyms, and John, who's the only smart one in the group that got rid of his.
Thank you very much.
It really is just one of these things that happens, and we're stuck going, man, as if the gym business wasn't hard enough. We're hit with this as it is. And then, you know, the rent, and then when you do come back, this is where everyone gathers. This is where everyone kind of sweats and leaves their mark everywhere. So it's
the other part of the problem is
our sanctuary. It's our sanctuary in a lot of ways.
It is.
It's that sanctuary way.
The other problem is, you know, whether you want to say it's wrestling, jiu-jitsu, MMA, none of them are what we call social distancing type of activities.
No.
Okay.
Definitely not. In fact, the opposite.
Exactly. Makes it tough.
Higher risk for sure.
So let me ask you this: we've been
professions in the public eye and public life, shaking hands, meeting people. I mean, I was in Ohio, and that was one of the first major events that got shut down. Was the Arnold Classic. A week later, I had to be in New York City for our new chapter of MVP, Emerging Vets and Players. Right when the Westchester quarantine area was breaking out, and it was honestly a little weird to be in New York City and see it as slow and you know, there was hardly any people around. It was really strange. And to walk in, we rode down the strip the other night on our motorcycles at 9:00 at night to see what it was like. Literally vacant, a ghost town on the strip in Las Vegas. That's very, very strange.
Wow. I almost want to go just to do that and just, you know, just to see it, you know, stand in the middle of the road and take photos. Be like, you know what I mean? Hey, do it for the gram, baby. Do it for the gram. I don't know.
Two questions for you. You had a health problem. You tried to foam roll out a heart attack. All right. Which only goes to show how fucking intelligent you are. All right. I'll just roll this sucker out. How you feeling?
Feeling great, man. Blood's numbers are back down in. I've got to stay on top of the.
You're a little thinner now?
It wasn't a lifestyle issue, but
I don't mean that. I mean, your blood's thinner. You got that thick.
Yes, my blood is thinner.
It's natural.
They've got me on a statin. They've got me on a thinner. I'm going to have to stay on that because of the stint. They don't want anything sticking to that stint. I also have very naturally high hemoglobin and hematocrit levels. Those jumped up above normal, which is part of what led to the issue with the plaque in the one artery. And
now we know why you never got tired, you cheating bastard.
I guess I was made for this. I was made to be stacked and coagulate.
You work out with him and he just starts doing stuff and you're going, I'm getting tired. And boom, I'm down the ground. And he's like, you got a problem. Second is you have been very involved with MVP and veterans, and you've got your Couture Foundation and everything. Is there anything that you've seen that you guys have been able to do to keep those guys feeling good about themselves and out of problems? What have you been doing?
Absolutely. We started that very first week of the quarantine. We started our virtual MVPs in all 5 chapters on Zoom. We're having 50 and 60 folks show up, putting them through a half-hour workout in their living rooms with our trainers, and then spending another hour, doing the huddle, doing the peer-on-peer counseling and breakdown, and keeping them socially connected when we have to stay physically distant from each other. And it's been very powerful. It's been very good. And to your comment earlier, Josh, doing that with our gym, my strength and conditioning coach, Gil Gordado, has been putting out videos every day, new training sessions, new things you can do in your home that are easy to keep our clients connected, working out, and at least functioning on some capacity. So I think that's something a lot of other gyms have tried to implement as well.
Yeah, we have a lot of the trainers that I have, they do workouts out of their gym. So they just film and they basically just post them up on their social media and let anybody for it. So they reach out to the clients that we have normally, and they say, hey, I just posted a video, and then they can go. So in every member has a trainer that they specifically like more so than the other ones. So they normally follow that person on social media and end up doing their workouts. They'll mix it up also too with other people, because other gyms are now offering that as well, like you were saying. So when that happens, they can actually start seeing what other trainers are doing as well and try to mix those all in together. Because we had dropped a couple podcast. Dave, our producer here, him and I had done a couple workouts that we had put up on our
you heard
YouTube.
Him. You made him do some push-ups. He got all sore.
Those WWE guys, they don't know how to really work out. They just always wish they looked like The Rock.
But to your point, John, it's really a tough thing for a lot of these guys in transition. They're struggling with PTSD or TBI to be isolated. That's the worst thing for them. Is that little voice, our crazy roommate, that little voice in our head starts to go nuts when we don't have those outlets, those vents, and that support system that we're used to having. So that virtual thing has been a lifesaver for a lot of those guys.
That's awesome. Glad to hear that.
That voice in the head is sometimes louder in some people's head than the others, And so we were there that day in LA. Yeah, you weren't there that night, but then we went there when we had Bellator there when Chris Cyborg fought, and I got a chance to sit in on the meeting, and I kind of led the kickboxing portion of the workout. Everyone there is absolutely phenomenal. They had a bunch of great stories. I mean, it's crazy to think that this is what happens to people when they come home. You know what I mean? Like you meet them, you talk to them, and they're like, "Hey, how are you? Nice to meet you." And they're having it's a real conversation you would have with anybody else. But then when you sit down in that huddle and have a real one-on-one conversation in a group setting, and they just spill everything out and what they go through and the images that they see in their head, like when they sleep at night or when it's crazy to think that's a lot to handle for anybody, and I can sit at home and think about it all I want, but to put it into perspective, you have to sit down with someone, and especially in that group setting, and hear what they actually go through and what he or she visually sees, in their mind, what they remember and what they recall. And it's something that bugs them every single night. And it's all just so we can live the dream that we're living now, and it was a lot. It hit me a lot. And I was I didn't know what to expect, and I went in, I came out, and it was a different look on life, a different look on other people.
How about you, Josh? How was your transition? I mean, you made a decision to walk away from the sport that you've been a part of for quite a long time. Obviously, this is filling a void and giving you some sort of a new purpose. I mean, what was that process and that mindset like for you walking away from the sport?
Well, as like with you started your gym. When did you start your gym? When you were done yet, or did you have your gym before you were done?
No, I've had my gym for 15 years now, but that was a big decision for me. I think probably one of the two biggest decisions in my life. The first was getting out of the Army, you know, at 25 years old, where I'd been pursuing that Olympic dream and getting all my needs met for my family and everything else through the military. So getting out of the service to take a college scholarship was a big decision for me. That was risky.
So
I guess in some ways leaving my coaching job and pursuing fighting full time, 100%, was another pretty risky proposition. You know, no guarantees there. So the same thing, walking away from the sport. It took me a year to really come to terms with, was this the right time for me to walk away? And once I made that decision and walked away, I realized I'd done the right thing and I'd done it the right way. So,
yeah, I didn't want to make any brash decisions, but I guess for me, I knew that I was, when Strikeforce had gotten bought from the UFC and I was supposed to fight for the title, I was, right when I fought Benson, I was actually opening my gym at that time. So during that camp, my gym was opening. It was one of the most stressful times of my life. But I also knew as well that I was 36, 37 at the time. I also knew that I wasn't going to do it much longer. At 37 years old, you know that the UFC or any promotion is not going to promote you to be their champion for very long. And so I just...
37, 47.
37, 47. You know, I just knew, like, it's almost like a running back when they hit 30, less people are likely to spend the money on them. And I knew that. And you have to come to grips with that when the reality had set in that I wasn't going to be one of their top people that they helped promote, because they kept offering me young, talented guys, you know, that were just breaking onto the scene, that were exciting to watch. I knew that they were trying not just try to get me beat, but they just wanted to try and see if I did lose, I lost to a new up and comer. So when the reality had set in, that's kind of what they were doing. Opening the gym was something that I knew that would generate revenue as long as I was here. And you know, if you're not at your gym, money goes out the back door. You've got to be here as much as possible. You've got to be looking over it. You got to be shaking hands. You got to be you have to be social with everybody that's in your facility. No more shaking hands.
No more shaking hands. Just bump at best, maybe an elbow.
That's it.
So when all that happened, I just knew that this was another stream of revenue that I could have come in to help supplement what I was making from fighting. Now, that was the other thing. It's never going to be the amount of money we made fighting. It's not going to be that. It's like a professional athlete, right? An NFL player. When they get out, a lot of them are not going to be as blessed like as Herschel. Herschel makes really good money doing with his chicken company and his linen company. And, you know, some of the other guys are, but not all of them have been that successful. A lot of them end up broke, you know, and they've spent millions. And so when I start thinking about these guys, these professional athletes, baseball players, football players, when they've lost as much money as they've lost, it lets me know that what I've made in my career will definitely go if I'm not wise with it. So I just can't, as the gym was here, I just used that as soon as I had lost my fight to Benson, I focused a lot on the gym, took the fights when they came in, and just spent a lot of time and energy, you know, with the members here at the gym, and tried to build that up. So that was bringing me in an income. I think as long as we know that their next paycheck is coming in, I think mentally we feel safe about that. For the military though, for vets that get out, they're lost. They don't know what else to do. And I think had I not had the gym to rely back on, that would have been something I would have been twiddling my thumbs, going through depression probably. But I opened the gym. Worst decision I ever made was opening the gym. But it gave me something to focus my energy back on that generated some sort of revenue. Made it easier for me to make that decision.
That became your new purpose and your new drive. And I mean, John, you walked away from law enforcement after a very, very long time. That had to have been an interesting transition for you. I know you had reffing, your gym, and all the other things to focus your energy on, but still, that was a huge part of your identity for a big part of your life.
That was the greatest moment that I ever had getting away from it, man. You know, I always looked at the LAPD was my safety net, because if everything else went away, I still had that job, and I enjoyed the job. I enjoyed what I did. I got to play every day. So mine, you know, near the end of my career, I would only go out on the street once a month, and I got to play, teaching people the whole time. So I had a great job. But when you walk away from something, Josh says something that's very true. You've got to give up your old life to gain a new one.
Yeah.
And you've got to give up that past life. And so, if you're the fighter, you've got to find something that's going to replace what you're passionate about. And if you can find that thing, if you can find that thing, then you're going to make it, because you take that same energy. And the reason that both of you were successful is you're both hard workers, and you don't give in. You don't give up. If something gets in your way, I find a way over, around, or through that obstacle. That mentality will make you a winner. As long as you're willing to work hard and you have that type of mentality, I don't care what it is you decide to do, you're going to be a winner. But you have to put that same thought process, that same energy, and that same time into becoming that new life that you put into that old one.
I think it comes down to, though, is finding that something, though. That's really what it is. Like, if you don't, that's the hardest part. When they get done, they don't know what else to do. And then they don't know if they're just spinning their wheels, and they don't want to work for somebody else because they haven't been able to. I'm talking about athletes. As far as the vets, they come back and they just don't know. They don't know any, the world has changed since they left, probably. A year and a half, 2 years ago, when they got deployed or whenever it was they were gone, they've been living a different life everything was there available to them. They come out. It's like, okay, where do I live? Where's the grocery store? How do I shop? People now are just tapping credit cards before when they used to swipe them. Like, everything is new. Like little things like that make a big difference. They feel lost. They get out, they feel lost. What do you mean? What's this thing called social media? They don't know these things. A lot of these guys don't. They come out.
I don't know what they are either.
Yeah.
The one thing that I think Jay Glazer tapped in with MVP is it was that camaraderie. Mm-hmm. It is what makes the military what it is you're not getting paid crap, but you have a camaraderie with those other brothers and sisters out there that you say, I will die for you. And that goes, it's the same thing that happened, was with mine in LAPD is I when I left, people ask me all the time, do you miss it? And I go, dude, I miss the clowns. I don't miss the circus. And that's the thing. That's the thing. It's the people that make things special and makes you want to be there. Why do you want to go back to Afghanistan and do that? Because it's the people that are there. I believe in those people. They believe in me. And it's a camaraderie that you cannot get anywhere else. And if you can find that way, and I think that's what MVP has been doing for these guys, you find that way to find that simple thing called camaraderie, brotherhood.
We give them their squad back. We give them that locker room back.
That's it.
That's what I miss, my training partners.
Yeah.
The time I spent with those guys sweating and bleeding and seeing on a regular basis. And, and for me, the biggest thing from fighting was the impetus for my high school buddies, my college buddies, my Army buddies to all come to the fights wherever they were. I would see those guys and reconnect with those. That's the only thing I miss about it. Yeah. Plus there was a simplicity, a regularity. I wasn't running around. I was at home training every day, eating well and all those things. There was that regularity, but it's those guys. That's the part I miss. And I think that's the part that MVP tries to get back. That little piece of their identity and that group of that support system.
That's the same as the military. You know what your daily schedule is when you're an athlete. Okay, I have practice at this time. I'm going to get up, go for a run. I'm going to have breakfast. And then after that, I'm going to get a little bit of a nap. Then I'm going to go to training, lunch, shower, do all these things, come back, hit mitts. Like you said, it's a routine. It's daily scheduled, but like it's mindless. We don't have to worry about what we're going to do next because we already know. We were on a group text from all the people from the production, and they said, "Yeah, it's Tuesday." I'm like, "Oh, it's wrestling day." In my mind, for the last couple of years, I didn't know what Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I just knew, okay, today is wrestling day. Today's sparring day.
Right after you said that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, damn it. You know what I mean? But like, we have sparring Monday, Tuesday's wrestling, sparring Wednesday, Thursday, jiu-jitsu. Like that's how your mind, I think for years, that's how athletes, they work. And I'm sure it's the same for the people in the military. Today's shooting day. Today's, I don't know, whatever it is, And so they have in their mind what they're going to probably do that day. Like, we got to get better at this day. not a lot of people think of the dates. Like, oh, I don't have to write a check today, and today's what, April? You know what I mean? So the daily routine and the daily grind, and it's mindless just to get up and go, hey, okay, today this is what I'm doing. And that's gone once you're out of the military, once you're not an athlete anymore, and you have to find things to fill your time. And that's when all the trouble happens. You know, it's no different.
There's also a big issue, I think, with adrenaline. I mean, you're never more alive than walking out of that tunnel. You're never more alive than you are on a battlefield, oddly enough, or out on that football field. There's this whole adrenaline thing that becomes a part of your existence too. And now what? Now you're just a regular human. That's tough for guys to swallow.
I think that's a big reason why I don't know about Foot John, but you were in the center of the cage, always reffing, and it just there's got to be some sort of adrenaline there. You know, he makes it seem so easy, right? But it's like there's a lot that goes into it. I was
always just trying not to screw up, man. That's your adrenaline.
But the three of us have been really lucky and blessed. The fact that like we can sit cage side, call fights. That's a little bit that to me is an adrenaline rush. You get to see the ups and downs of what a fighter goes through right there at the cage. I mean, people pay thousands of dollars to sit cage side to watch fights, you know, and we're doing it every time there's a show, and we're doing it we're actually getting paid to do it, not just doing it for free. We're doing it because we get paid, and we love it. So that's kind of like another way of fulfilling that adrenaline rush of being on the football field or being on the battlefield and, you know, and handling weapons or, you know, winning a gold medal, whatever it is. It gives you that void versus getting hit. Because I walk past the cage now. I tell John this all the time. I walk past the cage now and I hear those guys getting hit. And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't even sound fun. Fuck that. Sounds good. No, thank you. No, thank you.
Yeah, so, it's funny. I do a course, and I do it once a year, and I do it now at Randy's gym in Las Vegas.
July, right?
In July is when we'll see. Yeah. Maybe. You know, hopefully.
Yeah.
But one of the things, you know, I get people all the time talking about, you know, how much money do you make? You know, and it's like, dude, you're not going to make money doing this. This is that's not what it is. But I tell them all the time is, hey, this is what you got to look at. And this is the way I always looked at it. I get to walk into some of the greatest arenas man has ever had. And I get to walk past the security, and I get to walk down towards this cage that's down at the floor. I said, and I get to go down there. No one stops me. I get to go in the back into the locker rooms. I get to talk to fighters, and I get to do all these things. And it's priceless. Yeah. Because once it's gone, you'll realize what you lost. And I tell guys this all the time, and guys that are either inspectors, judges, referees, fighters, trainers, I tell them all, hey, when it's gone, you're going to know. You're going to miss it. Because it's just priceless. You can't put a price on it, and it's something that just makes it to where you go, I love what I do. And that's, you know, the part you're talking about, you know, that adrenaline rush. And you're going to get that no matter who you are.
Yeah, you got to think when you go to the forum and you walk down that long trucking entryway, it's got all the names of the people that have played there on the wall. And you're thinking to yourself, this is crazy to think that I'm walking down this thing and they've just checked my ID and I'm just walking right in. Not a big deal. Everyone's saying hi. And you're like, man, Bon Jovi's been here. Motley Crue's been here. The Rolling Stones have been here. Muhammad Ali's there. Like the Lakers played. Like you're thinking to yourself, all these people have walked this same hall. It's crazy. You know, when you start putting it in perspective that way and how lucky and blessed we are. So I think about it all the time on how fortunate we are to be living this life. And it's great. I mean, like I said, but the ultimate thing is giving them another outlet that they feel comfortable with living. And I think that's the hardest part, because if I didn't have my gym, I probably wouldn't have retired. I'd still be trying to fight, trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do after? My grandfather always told me, don't quit one job until you have another one. So I was thinking to myself, like, hey, you know, you can't just quit and then go try and find another job. You need to keep your job, even though if you're miserable or not, okay, is keep it until you find another one. Then, okay, that one can go. You've got to always make sure you have a revenue stream coming in. Like, you know, another good thing is just don't spend the money you don't have. You can't afford to buy it cash. You don't need it. You know, I mean, outside of your house, I mean, that was like, those are those two lessons that I think I took with me for my whole life. And that helped me get to the point where I never wanted to be searching for what I was going to do next. I just wanted to have it, be comfortable with doing it, and be content, and then that grows into something else, hopefully. So,
Randy, you were a pioneer. UFC 13 was your first show. So that shows how freaking old you are, because you're as old as me almost. And,
yeah, because you were there too, John.
Yes.
Yeah, I know. I wasn't going to bring that part up. I was going to say I was a kid watching it on TV, and boy, I really enjoyed watching it.
Yeah.
But then,
I get that all the time. I've been watching you my whole life.
Dude, I've been watching you since I was 5 years old.
Jeez.
But you spanned an incredible amount of time. You fought for a lot of different places and people. The UFC was your big thing. What is it that you see as the difference between the way, obviously, it started and what we're seeing now? Is there anything that you look at and you go, man, here's what I see is the big change?
Well, I mean, obviously the crowds, the fan base, the exposure on bigger platforms around the globe is way bigger. UFC 13 was one of the last pay-per-views for a while there. I think they went to an online model. That was the only place you could find the sport because of the McCain backlash and all the other stuff going on back then. Now we're literally on the ticker and ESPN, and they're cordoning off half of the arena just for the weigh-ins. It's a completely different animal now than it was back then. I think running towards regulation, creating unified rules, a scoring system that most people can understand and is accurate most of the time, all are things that help the sport grow the way it has as the combative sport for this generation. I think the one thing that needs to be addressed, and that maybe it's the elephant in the room, is that the fighters need to get a fair share of the pie. Most of the promoters are still using a flawed system where the promoter and the sanctioning body are the same guy. It's way too much power. These contracts are horrible. There is no other professional sport in our society where 13 to 15% of the proceeds are going to the athletes actually performing in those shows. Yeah. I mean, it's at least 50% in football and most of the other professional sports out there. Boxing is more like 60 to 70%.
Closer to 80.
Sometimes 80, depending on who's on that card. So I think that's the one area where we have some room to do as athletes coming together. Why don't we have a players association, a fighters association, so we can collective bargain and get our fair share even as independent contractors? I think these are all things that our sport needs to embrace, and we as fighters need to educate ourselves on the system and why are we not making the kind of Floyd Mayweather money or Conor McGregor money who goes into one boxing match and literally made more than he's ever probably going to make in MMA. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's crazy. And so there's a disparaging problem there in our sport. And I think it's as popular as it's going to continue to grow. I don't think it's going to fade off or go away. It's way too entrenched in our society. But I think the fighters need to organize, educate themselves, and come together to get their fair share of what they're putting into it, because they're putting their butts on the line on a regular, and they're not getting a fair share, in my opinion.
I'm going to play devil's advocate. Those are the people that are going to turn and say, well, because you only get one fight, like Floyd Mayweather and Conor, you get other fights, sure, but those other fights they're not really mainstream fights. There may be one or two people you've heard of, but not really watched fight. You're only getting one fight. That's why those top two guys, Mayweather and Conor, or whoever else, get the big fair share. If MMA went to that program, maybe they would make more money. Just one main event and then a bunch of nobody.
Look at what those other boxers on those cards are making. They're still making more than our mid-tier or lower-tier fighters in MMA. So, I mean, their pay scale is much different and much bigger than ours. So the Ali Act that was implemented in 96 kind of separated those powers, created transparency in the contracts and the way promoters had to operate because of guys like Don King and in some ways Arum. The fighters were being taken advantage of in boxing for a long, long time. And it took the fighters coming together to change that part of their sport and allow things like Ali and Mayweather and some of these other guys that made tons and tons of money. Now, some of those guys didn't take care of it, just like you were talking about earlier, and they let that stuff go. We have this mentality that'll never happen to us.
Yeah,
I mean that's kind of what makes us good. It makes us good at walking up in that cage and doing what we do because there is an air of invincibility in that mindset, and I think sometimes that can be our worst enemy too, our own detriment.
Do you look at us like, I feel like, because MMA is, even though we say it's a relatively new sport, what's it been, 26 years now? It's been 25, 26, I think 26 years. It still is a relatively new sport when you consider like boxing and other sports. But do you feel, I kind of feel like we're in that women's U.S. national team conversation argument where they're selling out arenas but not getting a big fair share of the pie. That's where the MMA fighters are at the same position. They're the ones putting in all the fans are actually hundreds of thousands of fans are coming to their events and their games, and they're not getting, that's where they're filed for a claim for them to get paid equally as much as the men or whatever it is. And I feel like the MMA fighters are kind of a little bit on that same page because it is relatively new. Fighters are selling out arenas, but they're not really getting compensated for it.
That's interesting. I would like to see the math. Are you talking about women's NBA or which women's?
No, U.S. soccer team.
Women's soccer. Okay,
Women's soccer,
okay.
Yeah, the U.S. national team.
You got to look at women's soccer sells out more than as far as the men's soccer team, U.S. men's soccer team. The women's is more popular, makes more money, but they get paid less. And that's all I watch.
When I watch the U.S. teams, I just watch them.
They don't flop on the ground.
Yeah, that's very true.
Rise in pain when they work up.
They don't take.
No, they don't all look like LeBron out there every time he gets bumped. The guy's
kills me.
LeBron's 285 pounds, and I swear he sometimes a hand goes by his face and he's on the ground. You're like, didn't even hit you. Oh, it just grazed my nose. No, it was one of those, man. No, they sell out. They sell out. 100,000 seat arenas. They've multiple time gold medalists. I mean, this team is amazing, and they just filed a suit against the U.S. Soccer League, basically saying that they want to be compensated as if like the men. They're not over and beyond, but they want to be compensated equal to with the men, and they're the ones selling out the arenas. I feel like with the fighters, it's very much similar to that. These guys are not. If you were to make an argument, you could say that it'd be kind of on the same wavelength. But it's just because we're a relatively new sport, we haven't got into it. I don't know. It's a conversation to be had, I think, in that situation.
Certainly an interesting analogy for sure.
I can't say the same about WNBA because they don't sell out the arenas. They don't.
Oh, that's why I was asking. No. I didn't catch the soccer part. I just heard women's sports.
No. I mean, because not all women.
So it wasn't your bad hearing; it was Josh's bad questioning.
Oh, yeah. I think I said U.S. national team is what I said. Yeah, I think I didn't say. Okay, I said U.S. national team. Yeah, but yeah, I think because the WNBA, they're not selling out arenas. They're a lot of the other women's sports are not doing as well as the women's soccer is, and so I think the conversation should be had something similar in those two things. There's a conversation, like I said, to be had in that type of situation.
Yeah, it opens up some interesting questions, you bet.
With the situation that just occurred with UFC 249 getting closed down, do you have any thoughts on, were you for them trying to make that show happen, or do you think, man, they're not the right time? What were you thinking?
I mean, I had such mixed feelings because you start balancing how much of this is hype. I mean, we start talking about the real numbers and look at the flu that happens every year, or so many other things and ways that people die. And where does this register on that same scale? And we're making such a huge deal and literally tanking our economy on a worldwide level over it. At the same time, everybody else is on lockdown. Why do you think it's okay to go out and try and put on a show, and put athletes in harm's way potentially with so many unknowns? I don't know. I had mixed feelings about it. I felt like there was some, selfishness going on in pushing this as far as they did, and I think finally ESPN had to step up and literally pull the plug on it and say we're not going to broadcast it to get it shut down. But now we're still hearing talks about Fighter Island and all this other crazy stuff. Pandemic Island, I think, is what we should call it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think we all in this together, so why should anybody be exempt? And UFC is no different than any of the rest of us.
You get into the conversation is that like, look, within 3 or 4 weeks, this whole thing could be lifted. So why force that one fight to be in there and put these people at risk? And, our podcast producer here, he's a big fan of the WWE, and they just had WrestleMania with no crowds. But one of the employees ended up getting the COVID. So that lets you know that, like, look, it takes a lot of people to run these shows if they're going to be on TV. And John and I talk about this all the time. You're talking over 100 people easily, even if they downgraded it to below 100, which I think would be kind of hard for 100 people to run a show. That's not counting the athletes, the wrestlers, the fighters, whatever it is. It's a lot of people to help try and get this on TV. If something's bound to go wrong. I mean, and if they're forcing it that much, it just doesn't make sense, especially knowing that within 3 weeks it could all be gone. It could actually be back to normal, within the next couple of weeks.
We ain't gonna be back.
I was at the Arnold Classic. I was at the Arnold Classic, which was the first big event to get shut down. And the state wanted to cancel it altogether. Schwarzenegger pushed back. He said, "No, all these athletes have trained. They're all coming here. 2 days before this is supposed to happen. You can't just cancel it. We're going to have our events. We're just going to cancel the Fan Fest. We're going to cancel all the fans and sell no tickets." It was weird walking around there, seeing all these athletes perform with no spectators. I think the only event that had any spectators at all was the actual bodybuilding finale. It was bodybuilding strongman and women's physique or something that was the big finale. They had already sold those tickets. So there was actually fans and people in that arena for that event, but all the other ones were empty. It was really, really weird when normally you're used to seeing a couple 100,000 people come through that venue over the course of the weekend. So who knows, but Schwarzenegger pushed back a little bit. And I don't know. It's really hard to say. I didn't feel exposed. Everybody was practicing, touching elbows or not, not embracing, keeping that social distancing thing. Some people were wearing masks. Some people weren't. Again, it's the same thing that I walked to the store yesterday. Probably half the people had masks on, half the people didn't. What does the mask really do? No. It doesn't protect you from a virus. It may remind you not to touch your face, but it doesn't really effective in preventing the virus from entering your system. So I don't know. If you're coughing, it's going to keep you from projecting that to everybody else around you. But, I don't know. It's tough to decipher what's real, what's not. What's a power grab and a money grab and all this other stuff, and what's genuinely precautions to keep people safe. There's a very fine line there.
Yeah, I do see the mask does prevents a lot of people from touching their face, because I was just flipping through stuff the other day at my house through the office, and I lick my finger, then touch my face. Then you're like thinking to yourself, man,
I'm telling you, that's
start wearing a mask.
I put that mask on because I'll put the mask on like if we're riding motorcycles. That's all I'm doing is touching that thing the whole time as it starts to slide down and picking up.
That's true as well.
It's all bullshit.
Not all of us have a big nose like that, though. That's the other thing, John.
Yeah, which should keep it up more, right? One of the things that goes on with you're doing a lot of commentary for the PFL, and you got a couple of great fighters there, but a lot of the fans don't give credit to those guys because they're not in the UFC. What do you do to try to make people understand how good those guys are? And yes, they're on that same level as the top guys. Is there anything that you look at as, hey, this is the thing that needs to be done? Or what do you think about cross promoting, all those types of things?
Well, I think you have to check your ego and be willing to open up your mind to cross promotion. Obviously, with free agency and some of the antics and stuff that's gone on with the biggest promotion, we're getting a lot of filtered people going into Bellator, going into the PFL. We have Rory this new season coming up. I mean, we've signed some market guys, that trigger guys that people are going to pay attention to. Yeah. And we'll see how those guys fare in the field from, where we had 16 countries represented in the last season. It's definitely a big pool of fighters from all around the globe, and it's been fun to watch. But it's hard to get the fans to recognize, because it's not the UFC, that these are real guys and that they're quality. It takes time to build a brand. It takes time to translate that quality to the fan base, I think.
How did this all come about with you working with the PFL?
They approached me after Revolution bought out what used to be the World Series of Fighting, and they were looking to change their format and rebrand. And they asked me if I'd be interested in trying out commentating for them. They hired me for 5 events that year to see if it was a fit. They were doing, 4-man booth, 3-man booth, a whole bunch of different things, trying to feel what they thought was new, exciting, different. And so I was kind of part of that process. They liked how I fit in, and that next first season came on of the new brand and the whole thing, and they asked me to be part of it. They kind of wanted me to be more involved with the fighters, but I wasn't sure about the format, to be honest. And I've been pleasantly surprised. I mean, you're asking a lot of a fighter to turn around and fight 5 times in 6 months, 6 or 7 months. That's a lot. Yeah. But and that was my question, and if I was a younger man, would I have done it? Hell yeah, I'd have done it, especially for $1 million.
Yeah.
But, but that was certainly a question. And then to watch those fighters in that first season step up, deal with that adversity, put it on the line each and every time in the regular season and in the playoffs. I mean, it was just fun to watch. It was engaging. How each one of them took on that adversity and dealt with that adversity was all part of that onion, and just made it fun to be a part of. And I think it's just continuing to grow, and that format is a challenge, but I think people get it. They like it, and it's going to be fun.
Do you think that, because Lance Palmer is there at your gym, correct?
What's that?
Lance Palmer, he trains out of your facility, correct?
He did for the first season, and then the second season he went to Jersey.
Okay.
With Frankie Edgar and those guys, and rightly so. More guys at a higher level that he could train with on a regular, and you can see that, I think, in his performance, in his back-to-back win, his performance. His striking got better. He was a better performer, I think, in that second season than he was in that first season. Do
you feel that this tournament styles favors wrestlers, though, a lot more than it would someone like that fights a kickboxing style or has more of a neutral MMA style?
I think it can. I think because, especially when you're fighting twice in one night, having that ability to smother somebody, take somebody down, float over them, not sustain a lot of damage, even though you're still spending some energy, but we're used to that. I mean, heck, the NCAA tournament is one of the most grueling tournaments in wrestling that I've ever been a part of. And you're literally in 3 days wrestling 5 huge matches, plus warming up and staying in the zone and all of this stuff, that whole 3-day period. I mean, it's grueling. So that wrestling mindset translates well to this format. You're looking at Dagestanis that are doing well, wrestlers like Lance and others that are doing well because of that mindset.
How has it been? Sean, your partner now, he fought in the first season and then became the play-by-play. Didn't become a color commentator. He became the play-by-play guy.
Yeah. Astonishing.
So, astonishing.
That's
and
crazy.
He's mental. He is absolutely mental.
We were telling him he was crazy as hell too. And he took it all in stride. He had that style that lent itself to him being able to do that. He also has a very strong mindset. It didn't bother him. It was something that used as a pleasant distraction from the waiting game of fight night. And I don't know if I could have done it, honestly, but he did it.
Being able to do it and wanting to do it are two totally different things. I don't know why you would want to do it. I don't know why either. We for the Connecticut show that was canceled in Mohegan Sun, Morrow had ended up getting kidney stones, and they had sat John down and said, "Hey, John, you're going to have to do Morrow's job, and we'll bring Josh. Josh will be down there calling the fights with you."
I was so screwed.
I was thinking to myself, John, are you going to be okay with this? Because I'm getting nervous for you. I was like sweating, man.
I swear to God, one of the first thoughts that went through my head, and this is where I'm talking about Sean, is like, holy shit, I'm going to make Sean O'Connell look great.
Oh, man. It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, Sean's really starting to get his feet under him as a play-by-play guy.
Not an easy job.
No, it's not. It's not. Absolutely not. So I admire how far he's come, and he's really getting pretty dang good at it, in my opinion.
Rogan tells that story about Goldie all the time, how Rogan had to take over Goldie's spot one time because Goldie had an emergency or Goldie couldn't make it to UFC one of the events.
42.
Yeah, couldn't make it in Miami.
Oh.
Miami, so Shirk and Hughes. And Rogan had to be the play-by-play. And he's like, when Goldie came out, he's, don't ever fucking do that to me again. Don't ever. He's like, I don't want this job at all. So it's one of those stories that I've heard Joe tell a couple times on his show. It's hilarious, man. It's got to be stressful. It's got to be stressful.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, even just doing the color, and it's a sport that obviously I was involved in and know and like talking about, but even doing the color, having somebody talk in your ear while you're trying to expound and stay on task and be somewhat intelligent. I know that's a stretch, but somewhat intelligent
Big
while you're
stretch.
talking.
For all of us.
It's a challenge, man. It's not easy. And now you throw reading cards and getting the right card to be able to do the next bump to the next thing while you're doing that at the same time. I mean, forget it. It's pretty challenging.
Yeah, trying to read a card while someone's yelling at you in your ear, and then you're trying to speak it out while the camera's on you, and people are all staring at you. There's a lot going on. I mean, I got to tip my hat to all those color guys. I mean, those play-by-play guys. It's crazy, man. There was something I wanted to talk to you about was, you know, you're the 205 champ, heavyweight champ. You know, I feel like you were ahead of the curve. You were never a big heavyweight, and you got guys now that I think are having success in the heavyweight division, being wrestlers coming from a wrestling background. You got Bader having success at heavyweight in Bellator. You've got, you know, DC, obviously, he can be a heavyweight when he's off season, but he normally walks around about
super heavyweight right
yeah,
now.
he's a big boy right now.
It's all about that cake.
Yeah, it's all about that cake. But DC, Kane, those guys they were never big heavyweights. You know, Kane only walked around about 235. You know, I mean, he could get up, you know, a little bit like DC, but he was never a big guy. I mean, I remember one of his fights, he weighed at 232. He said he felt best fighting at like, you know, 228, 232, somewhere in there. DC, same thing. So I feel like you were ahead of the curve. You were always a little bit of the smaller guy. Tim Sylvie was huge, big mountain of man.
I think obviously you have to fight the bigger guys smarter.
Yeah.
You don't want to go nose to nose and just trade blows with a guy that size. It takes one shot to end your night. And I know that firsthand. You know, but mobility is a huge factor in fighting in that cage, as you well know. And I think that's something that the smaller heavyweights bring, is that they're a little more agile, a little more athletic than the bigger lumbering guys. That they certainly pose interesting problems still, but I think if you make those guys move and make that the key of the fight, it'll pay off, certainly as the rounds drag on. And I think that's the difference. But that's it. I mean, it's a mindset, preparation, studying tape, and going in there with that in mind, realizing I can't stand right in front of this guy and try to go nose to nose. It's going to be a bad night.
I gotta ask you then, there's going to be the rematch with DC and Stipe. And, you know, I know that there was a lot of rumors going around that, you know, Bader and Stipe had trained. They'd done really well, and Bader did really well against him. How would you see if we were to put a three-way fight between Bader and DC and, you know, and Stipe, those three guys, if they were mixed all together, how would you see a lot of that going down? And DC and Stipe are going to fight again, I believe, in August. I think they said July, end of July or August is what they were talking about. How do you see the rematch going with that? And how do you see Bader fitting into that?
I think Bader would absolutely hold his own. You know, and if you look at DC and Bader, they're very similar in size, similar in background. I think DC has a little more natural heavy hands. Mm-hmm. I'd like to see in the rematch with Stipe, if DC make him wrestle more. That's a strength. That's the thing, you know. And I know
everyone is telling DC wrestle more.
DC's had some success with his hands. I mean, we saw this with Dan Henderson. We've seen this with, you know, Johnny Hendricks. These wrestlers that had that knockout or found that they have that one punch power, and then they kind of start to go and rely on that or want to end fights that way because it's easier. I mean, it's not rocket science. It's easier than grinding it out. It's easier than taking guys down and smothering them and grinding it out. So they're going to let that fly. But I think he definitely has to get back to making Stipe wrestle him. That'll be the difference in the fight. Stipe's done a good job of shoring up his wrestling and making it more of a strength for him. I mean, and that's why he's being as successful as he is. It'll be interesting to see if Bader can make that transition, compete with both of those guys. I was always more concerned fighting another guy that had that strong wrestling background, those strong wrestling roots. Randleman had my undivided attention. I knew that was going to be a tough fight for me. I couldn't go out and get away with the things I was used to getting away with because of my wrestling background.
John?
You also faced Mike Van Arsdale, which was actually a tough fight for you in the first two rounds. First round was very tough. Second round, it was, you were narrowing that gap, but he would pull ahead. And then the third round, I think you finished him off with an anaconda choke.
Yep.
That's the kind of thing you're talking about. Facing a wrestler, they can create problems for you. But you being a guy that you didn't have that big knockout power. You did knock Tim Sylvia on his ass, but anyone, you know, hit it on the right spot can go on their ass. But you had a ability to push a pace on guys and make them fight your style of fight and make them uncomfortable. How much satisfaction did you get in being in there at a certain point knowing, oh, he's breaking? That
was my goal. That was my goal every time I walked up in there. And I think that I learned that at Oklahoma State, wrestling for the Cowboys. I think that that's something that was fostered in Greco-Roman wrestling because of the upright posture, the chest-to-chest pummeling. It's not like freestyle where you can bend over and post a guy and find a way to rest. You're literally engaged, pummeling and fighting for position the entire time. And it wears on you. It's a different kind of conditioning. And those were things that I thought I saw as strengths that I could bring in to a fight with a cage, a barrier that I could trap a guy against and make him pummel and make him work harder than he wanted to work. That was my goal every time I walked out there. And you know, when you get it right and it's successful, it's a good night. And when you miscalculate it, it's not nearly as fun.
Is there anything, when you look back on your career, is there anything that you, I don't want to say want to change, but you would like to maybe potentially do differently? Like something that you were like, hey, the times are different now. Like, would it be something that would be done differently now with the times that are going on now versus back then?
You know, I don't think I'd change a thing. I think it was all part of this kind of body of work. It was a progression, a journey where I learned the losses were probably more important than the wins. I never watched the ones I won. I got the outcome I wanted. The ones I lost, I studied the crap out of them because that's where the learning was. That was where I was going to be a better athlete and ultimately a better man at the end of the day, was facing that adversity, picking myself up, figuring out where I went astray, what was the mistake, what could I do better. I mean, that was all part of the journey. So I don't think there's anything I would change. You know, you mentioned that Van Arsdale fight. That was the only time I really fought sick. I had that staph in my knee. I had to take prednisone and IV antibiotics 3 weeks going into that fight. I probably should have pulled out, but I couldn't force myself to do that. So, you know, I fought anyway, and that was the most tired I have ever been in a fight. And I was going into the third round. We're both exhausted. I've got my hands on my knees. I'm looking over across the cage at Van Arsdale. He's got his hands on his knees, and he's looking at me. And I forced myself to stand up and start bouncing in place and smiled at him. And I saw his face drop. I knew at that moment he was ready to give it up. He was going to be done.
Randy, I just want to tell you this. I cornered Van Arsdale for that fight. And that guy literally told Crazy Bob, just throw the towel in, I'm done. Between that round, second and third round, he said, throw the towel in. I'm not fucking going back out there, Bob. No, you're going to have to get me up off this seat. I'm not going back out there, Bob. And Bob goes, you get your fucking ass up and go back out there. I got
some frequent flyer miles in that fight. He threw me on my ass. That hip toss was stellar. I should have got a free airline ticket for that one.
First class,
I'm in
baby.
the process of changing headphones. These headphones are going to die.
Okay.
No problem.
I'm in the process of doing the succession paperwork, and Ryan is going to take over the gym, Extreme Couture.
Is he going to take it over now?
Yep, he's in line.
Good.
You know, and he moved and left his banking job 12 years ago to come down and run the gym, and it ended up fighting. That was kind of my intention then, and I think the time is right. So it's one of the things I felt bad about. We're literally going through the succession paperwork when all this COVID crap broke out and we had to shut the gym down.
Damn.
Man, what the heck?
And he's like, Dad, you're talking me into this? What the heck?
Here, I'm doing you a favor. Here you go.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Him and Eric do a great job there, man.
Yeah, they're both great guys, and
Yep.
couldn't be prouder of what they put together. And, you know, I think the gym took a dip when I retired and stopped grinding out camps and stuff. And a lot of guys scattered to a bunch of different gyms. And between Dennis Davis and then Robert Follis for the time that we had him, with Ryan and Eric's leadership, they really kind of refocused and rebuilt the gym in a lot of ways. So again, another reason why I think it should roll to him now and let him continue to do what he's been doing while I've been out gallivanting around doing acting jobs and stuff like that.
You know what? Now you just brought it up with Robert Follis. Talk to me. I wanted to ask you this because we've known Robert for a long time. He fought Trevor Prangley back in Portland on Steve Boyd's show.
I remember
one of the cards out there. Remember that? And then I was on that card as well. Chael was on that card. Nate Quarry was on that card. He meant a lot to that gym. He meant a lot to a lot of people there. I mean, you see Kevin Lee. He was having a hard time dealing with it, and he ended up going out there to Faraz Sahabi's, to try to fill that void. Nawad Lahad is one of my good buddies. He just said that Robert was one of his closest friends, because I actually joined the two of them together because Nawad moved out there with his wife, and I said, hey, you got to hit this guy up. He's really good. He's a great person, and he ended up being. And he said we ended up being really, really close before everything happened. He goes, how was the dynamic changed at the gym, and what was it like after that? That's losing someone you were obviously very close to, but was really ingrained in your gym.
Robert and I were friends for over 20 years, and I think a lot of people in that same spot, the Nuad and Kevin Lee, and because he was such a mentor and a positive influence on so many people, and to have somebody like that take their own life was a shocking thing. It was, left you with a lot of questions, that survivor's guilt, which is a horrible thing. Well, maybe I could have done something. Maybe I could have said something. And you have to know Robert and know his background and know where he came from to understand this was something he calculated very, very well. There was nothing any of us could have done to change his mind, unfortunately. And that goes back to his Jehovah's Witness days and his upbringing, and all. There's a whole bunch of things there that not a lot of people knew. Even some of his closest friends didn't know that stuff was there. And I think Nate Corey shined a light on some of that in the memorial services and stuff that I think allowed a lot of people to wrap their brain around it, because he was so positive, because he did have such a positive influence on so many people. That it was devastating to have that happen. To have that go down that way, and I think there was some finger pointing, and there was a lot of things that happened that we just had to be very open, create a dialogue, and really kind of let it all hang out there. As much as we all loved and respected Robert, his final act was not something that I can abide by. I can't. I understand kind of where he ended up and why. But I still can't abide by it. And I just think you take everything that you're struggling with in that circumstance and you pass it off to everybody you love times 10 by that single act. And I don't know. It's a tough thing to deal with. I think everybody's recovered for the most part. I think we all have found a way to deal with it and wrap our brain around it. Dennis has stepped back up and tried to fill that void with the guys. So has Eric Nixick has really stepped up and tried to run practices and kind of take up that slack that Robert was filling when he was there as the coach. So, I don't think, we'll always remember him, and I think that's how he lives on, is we honor all those great things, those great words of wisdom, that technique, that coach, by carrying on that legacy in his remembrance. So.
Yeah, I try. There's a couple of things that I had learned along the way through life, and someone had talked to me about they had been part of suicide in their family, and then the police, and as well as the police officers that were involved in that, and some counselors and city officials that actually called this person and their family and said, "Hey, I want you to remember. I want you to realize this. You need to watch," because it was an older woman who had lost her son to suicide. And they said, hey, you need to watch your children because it's contagious, that if the father does it, that somebody in the family will potentially do it. So I always try to tell people, like, if you are feeling suicidal, you feel like this is something that is, that's eating at you, just remember that if you have kids, I believe like the ratio they said was almost 80% chance that one of your children will do it also.
Wow.
That is ridiculous. So when you think
I know this from our veteran community, because obviously it's a huge issue. We lose 22 a day. Every week, somebody in our circle of veterans loses somebody. And there's a ripple effect there, especially with social media and everything. Because you look at social media and you think, oh, wow, those guys got it made. Look where he's eating. Look what he's doing. And then something like that happens, and you immediately you put that on yourself. You're like, man, I thought he was doing great. And you know, and obviously he isn't or wasn't. Yeah. And then you start looking at your own life and the things you're struggling with and grappling with to get through. And that ripple effect, exactly what you're saying, is that suggestion, that power of suggestion is there. And
yeah, I like to tell people that, you know, people are talking about, I thought people have thought about it, or I know people that are thinking about it, or they had, and just say it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. You know, these are things that I think everyone can get through. You know, it's just going to take time. You need to have something that you focus on, as well as if you have children, do you want to hand that down to them and then put that responsibility on them as well? Not just the fact that you did it, but there's a good chance that they may end up doing it, thinking that it's okay later on down in life. You know, it's a sad situation to be in, I think. And, but those kind of things help keep, I think, put things in perspective. You know, if you were thinking about doing it, just remember, if you have children, that there is potentially a chance that they could do it. And secondly, is the thing that you're dealing with today will not be there tomorrow. And maybe it will, but it won't be as bad as you're feeling right there at that moment. So those are things. I mean, but on a high note though, how does it feel to know that, like, a lot of the guys that you would started off working with, from Nate, you know, to Nate Quarry, to Chael, to Robert Follis, all of them ended up being pretty successful in everything they did as far as in the MMA and the fighting community? Because I remember I fought on a lot of those shows, and the Steve Boyd shows in Oregon and up in there, and we were all on the same card. And you guys, it was you, I think Dan and Matt Lindland, you guys were sometimes judges for some of the events, or there for VIPs. Oh,
Jesus.
I know.
Oh my God.
I knew I had to finish the guy because I didn't want to go into the judges. But on a high note, how does it feel? Like, you know, guys like Chael have made a full-on career now out of this. I mean, like, being an analyst, being a fighter, being an athlete, like, you know, always driven. But like, you've got all these guys that have were successful and are still doing really well in the open eye.
I mean, that's the team part of this sport. Everybody thinks of this sport as that individual sport where, you know, you're the guy that walks up in that cage and you're out there by yourself. But there's a huge part of this team. You're only as good as the guys you're rubbing elbows with. And we had an amazing team up there, Team Quest. Yeah. They're an amazing group of guys, all at various levels, but look at how successful a lot of those guys were because of that. We all fed off of each other, taught each other, mentored each other. And I think that team aspect is what allowed us all the success and longevity that we've had.
All right, Randy. Hey, I want to thank you for coming on. And, you know, I want to catch up again as soon as this is all done. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, bud.
Pleasure, guys.
Good talking to you, brother. You take care of yourself.
Yep. See you guys soon.